I was chopping onions in our apartment kitchen when my phone buzzed with a message that didn't just sting, it detonated something in me. I've met someone better. I'm staying in Napa with him. Your stuff is in storage. Don't contact me. That was it. No explanation. No conversation. Just a screenshot of a wire transfer, $132,000 drained from our joint account and deposited into her own. My name is Grayson Lauren, 47 years old, and at that moment, standing in the kitchen of our Seattle condo, I realized my 12-year marriage to Marina had ended in 8 words in a spreadsheet. If this made your blood boil already, type justice in the comments. Marina had left 4 days ago for what she claimed was a spiritual wellness retreat in California with her old college friends. I didn't ask questions. She made it clear years ago that needing space was part of her personal growth. Over time, I stopped trying to be included. I stayed in my lane. As a data security analyst for a global firm, details were my specialty. I saw the little shifts: spa bookings under names I didn't recognize, travel receipts from cities that didn't match her story, Bluetooth devices connecting to our home system that weren't ours. She thought I didn't notice. That was her mistake. What Marina never understood is that I don't just work in cybersecurity. I build frameworks to prevent digital theft and espionage. For the last 18 months, I'd quietly tracked every deviation in our financial patterns. I wasn't sure what I'd find back then, but the trail kept growing colder and more expensive. Until now, I opened a private server she never knew existed. Inside was every record I'd quietly compiled: account transfers, flagged messages, even location pings. Not enough to confront her before, but enough to protect myself after. And now the moment had arrived. I stared at her message for a full minute. Then I opened our wedding photo album. Only one picture had both of us smiling without pretense. I closed it. That person didn't exist anymore. Without another word, I called Milo, my lifelong friend and tech partner who'd helped me create a backup protocol years ago when I first sensed something off. She made her move, I said. Activate Blackbird. He paused. Are you sure, Greg? She took everything but forgot the part I never shared. I hung up. The next steps were simple. First, I froze all joint accounts and issued a fraud claim against the transfer. Then I accessed the silent protocol, a dormant trust registered under a shell name tied to my late uncle's estate, where most of my actual assets were hidden. Marina never knew about it, because she never bothered to ask how I made our life possible. I wasn't hurt. I was done. She'd initiated a war she believed I'd lose, assuming I was passive. She forgot what I do when I go quiet. But this wasn't going to be a simple, clean break. As I opened my secure vault of recordings, one particular audio file caught my attention. A phone conversation from 2 months ago, recorded legally through our home automation system. Marina's voice, unmistakable, laughing with a man named Caden. Once I'm out, he won't even see it coming. He's just a guy with boring spreadsheets. Caden laughed too. And then what? He asked. Marina's reply chilled me. Then he disappears from my life, and I finally get what I deserve. By sunrise, my apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that follows a storm no one else saw coming. I made a pot of strong coffee and reviewed the blueprint of Marina's betrayal. Every breadcrumb she'd left behind was now a highlighted line in my master file. From luxury skincare orders billed to a hotel in Sausalito, to her newly purchased flight ticket not returning to Seattle. She never planned to come back. That's why she was bold enough to drain the account. In her mind, she'd already won. What she didn't realize was that she had walked directly into a trap I'd designed with precision. 3 years ago, I began preparing for the worst, not because I was paranoid, but because I saw patterns. I saw how Marina's curiosity about our life never extended past how much it could buy her. I remembered when she scoffed at my second promotion, dismissing it with, "That's great, babe, but does it mean we can upgrade the Tesla this year?" I wasn't angry. I made a note, and over time those notes became contingencies. Offshore investments, land deeds under alias entities, even a silent claim on the condo we lived in. Everything with my name on it was protected in ways she never took time to understand. I knew the next move wouldn't come from her. It would come from him. Caden, a former personal trainer turned wellness entrepreneur who hosted Instagram lives about mindset while dodging debt collectors in real life. Marina called him better. She didn't know I'd already dug into him 6 months ago, when his name first showed up in a suspicious Venmo transaction linked to her. His business, a crumbling startup funded by token investors and ego. His assets, a leased Mercedes, a rented townhouse, and a gym license about to be revoked. Marina hadn't found an upgrade. She'd found an opportunist. By noon, I'd contacted my attorney, Cassandra Lee, who specialized in high-asset divorce cases and digital fraud. I sent her the recordings, the bank statements, the timestamps. She was impressed. "You've built a prosecutable case," she said. "Marina's looking at charges if we pursue this through the DA." I nodded. "Let's move forward." I didn't care about revenge. I cared about precision. This was no longer a marriage. It was a security breach. That evening I checked the digital surveillance logs I'd discreetly installed in our home months ago. Motion was detected at 2:43 p.m. Marina had sent movers, strangers who entered with a code she no longer had permission to use. They took only her things plus some shared property artwork, electronics, but also my late sister's keepsake box. She knew how much that meant to me. She took it anyway. That was her final message, and mine had already begun. I opened a hidden folder on my drive labeled Arikan. Inside were backups of every message she ever sent or received through our home system. Photos, voicemails, calendar invites. One stood out. A booking for a founder's retreat in Santa Rosa. Caden was hosting it, and she wasn't just attending, she was co-hosting. There was a schedule, a press invite, and a list of featured guests, many of whom had been past clients of my cybersecurity firm. That was her fatal mistake, because Caden hadn't just stolen my wife. He had unknowingly infringed on my professional turf. And now I wasn't just coming for justice. I was coming for everything. The retreat was scheduled for the following weekend at a boutique vineyard just outside Santa Rosa. I booked a room at a nearby hotel under an alias and began compiling the final pieces of my strategy. I wasn't just going to ruin their plans. I was going to expose their entire scheme in front of everyone they were trying to impress. Marina believed I was passive because I'd never raised my voice. She confused silence for weakness. That was her second mistake. The first was betraying someone trained to think 10 steps ahead of everyone in the room. I contacted a private investigator I'd worked with on a few corporate espionage cases. Inez Holloway, sharp as a scalpel and twice as unforgiving. "I need full background on Caden's new venture," I told her. "Names, investors, pending contracts, everything." Within 48 hours I had what I needed. Turns out Caden's retreat wasn't just a spiritual summit. It was a funding pitch masked as a lifestyle event. Several wellness investors were flying in to hear about his expansion plans based on numbers. Marina had falsified using data from my secure client system, screenshots and snippets she'd taken from my firm's analytics board while pretending not to care what I did for a living. What Marina didn't realize was that I had quietly installed invisible watermarking into every dashboard and financial file I ever created. If she downloaded it, I could trace it. And I did. She'd used my client metrics to inflate Caden's pitch decks, showing fictitious growth to bait investors into a failing business. It was fraud. It was traceable. And it was going to be public. I arrived at the vineyard on the day of the event, blending in easily among the crowd of wellness influencers, financiers, and carefully curated guests. Everyone sipped organic wine and posed for selfies under hand-painted banners with words like "align" and "expand." Marina was radiant, flowing silk, glowing skin, every inch the queen of her new empire, and standing next to her, Caden, cocky and blissfully unaware, wearing a microphone headset and sunglasses too expensive for his actual net worth. I slipped into the back of the main conference room just as the presentation began. Caden clicked through slides, speaking confidently about scalable growth, proprietary wellness data, and future partnerships already underway. The numbers were stolen. The data was mine, and just as he transitioned into asking for investment commitments, the screen behind him froze and then flickered. That was Milo's cue. He had remotely accessed their AV system using a device I'd slipped into the sound booth earlier. In seconds, Caden's polished deck disappeared, replaced by a screen that read, "This data is stolen. Prof from Pavloran Digital Security. Invest at your own risk." The room erupted into gasps and whispers. Marina stood frozen. Caden turned pale, trying to unplug the system, but it was too late. The room was already flooded with people checking their phones. Within minutes, whispers turned into calls. Investors began leaving. One woman, an executive from a major wellness fund, walked right up to Marina and said, "We vet everything. You just committed career suicide." I walked out unnoticed, a shadow amid chaos. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't sent threats. I had simply let the truth speak louder than any revenge fantasy. But this wasn't over yet. The public fall was just part one, because while Marina was reeling from exposure, the legal side of my plan was only just beginning to unfold. 3 days after the retreat disaster, my attorney Cassandra called. Grayson, we've officially filed for divorce and submitted your evidence to the fraud division. Her tone was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. They're taking it seriously. Marina and Caden used stolen proprietary data to solicit funds. That's corporate fraud across multiple jurisdictions. I thanked her and hung up. Outside my apartment window, rain was falling. Seattle's signature morning for every mess. People thought they'd escaped. But I didn't feel grief. I felt momentum. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. You think you're clever? Caden's voice was clipped, rattled. You've made a mistake. I leaned back in my chair. I'm a data analyst. Mistakes aren't my thing. There was silence. Then we can settle this. Marina feels terrible. We didn't mean to blindside you. I actually smiled. I'm not interested in your feelings. I'm interested in what a judge thinks about you forging fake data to deceive investors. You've got 48 hours to come clean. After that, it's out of my hands. I hung up before he could reply. Meanwhile, Milo texted me a short update. Credit cards? Frozen. Condo lease Marina tried to sign in California? Canceled due to flagged identity risk. New business site? Taken down by DMCA request. She hadn't realized just how thoroughly I'd locked down everything connected to my digital and financial footprint. I didn't just want her out of my life. I wanted her to understand she never knew me at all. Not really. She thought I was a mild-mannered IT guy who'd fade into the background. She forgot what it means to be trained in watching everything while giving away nothing. Inez sent me a file of statements from Marina's private spending over the last year. Boutique wellness spas, private retreats in Big Sur, jewelry listed under alias, and a separate document. Shocking even to me, revealing that Marina had taken out a private line of credit using our home equity, forging my digital signature in the process. That crossed a legal line we could no longer ignore. Cassandra moved fast, submitting it with a request for emergency injunction. The judge approved it. Marina now faced possible felony charges for forgery and financial abuse. And just when I thought things couldn't twist further, Milo called me in a low voice. You need to see this. Check your email. I opened the file he'd sent and stared. It was a series of emails Marina had deleted, but not from the cloud. Messages to one of her friends outlining a plan. She had hoped to marry Caden quickly, move to Costa Rica, and live off Grayson's money for at least 5 years. My jaw tightened. This wasn't emotional confusion. It was a blueprint for financial assassination. The next morning, Marina finally reached out. A long, pleading voice note. No rage, no pride, just desperation. Grayson, please. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. I thought you didn't care. I didn't think you'd fight. There it was. The truth. She never thought I'd defend myself. But I had. And I wasn't done yet. Because I had one more card to play. One final reveal she would never see coming. The next week I met with Cassandra and Inez in a downtown office suite. The walls were lined with whiteboards filled with timelines, financial flowcharts, and asset maps. It looked like a war room. Because it was one. There's something new, Inez said, handing me a manila folder, buried in her Wellness Business LLC filings. We found 2 fake employee accounts created under your name and another under your deceased father's name. My stomach turned. She used my dad? Inez nodded grimly. She listed you both as silent investors and drew payroll against it for 9 months. This was bigger than I expected. Marina hadn't just betrayed me. She had constructed an alternate financial world using my identity as scaffolding. Cassandra wasted no time. This isn't just divorce or fraud anymore. This is identity theft. We now have grounds to press criminal charges on 3 counts. I said nothing at first, just stared at the paper trail of forged signatures and backdated contracts. Then I breathed in slowly and said, press all of them. Because this wasn't just about closure now. This was about accountability. That evening I returned to the condo, now mine alone. I walked into the empty bedroom where Marina's perfume still faintly lingered. I opened a drawer and pulled out the only thing I hadn't touched since she left our wedding album. On the last page in faded ink was a note she'd written on our honeymoon. You're too good for this world. Don't ever change. The irony almost made me laugh. I closed the album and placed it in a box. Some memories don't belong in storage, they belong in the past. The next day, Marina's attorney sent a frantic request for mediation. Her team wanted to avoid criminal charges in exchange for a fast divorce and asset surrender. Cassandra met with them and returned with a summary. They're panicking. Caden's under investigation now too. Turns out his name was used on some of the forged filings. Marina listed him as a co-investor without consent. I tilted my head. Wait. He didn't know. Apparently not. He's threatening to sue her if he goes down with her. A bitter twist of poetic justice. Inez followed up with a new lead. One of Marina's former clients from her yoga studio contacted us anonymously. Says she overheard a conversation between Marina and Caden weeks before the split. They were laughing about how easy it was to manipulate people who hide behind kindness. That was it for me. I recorded a short video statement and sent it to the district attorney's office detailing the full scope of the financial misconduct. I also attached my internal records, time-stamped and sealed. That night, the final domino fell. Milo messaged me with one line. The DA's opening an official case file. You've won, Grayson. But it didn't feel like a victory yet, because Marina hadn't lost everything. Not yet. She still had one card left to play, and if I knew her well, and I did, she was about to use it in a last desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative. I just didn't expect where or how that final act would unfold. 2 days later, Marina made her next move, just as I predicted. It came wrapped, not in apology but in performance. A lengthy post on social media, carefully filtered, perfectly timed. She painted herself as a survivor of emotional abandonment, claiming I had financially manipulated her for years. The photo? Her in yoga robes, crying softly in a candlelit studio. The caption? Some wounds are silent. Some betrayals wear suits. And just like that, the court of public opinion lit up. Friends, clients, followers all flooding the comments with sympathy and outrage. Milo texted me immediately. Damage control. She's pulling the victim card. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. I had already compiled everything. Time-stamped emails, receipts, deleted messages, and documents proving the opposite of her claims. But I wasn't going to respond publicly. Not yet. I wanted her to feel like she had regained control. Let her gather sympathy. Let her lean in deeper. The deeper she reached, the further she'd fall. And this time the fall would be documented. The next day, Inez intercepted a leak. Someone from Marina's inner circle, likely a desperate investor or scorned friend, sent us a copy of a private group chat between Marina and Caden. They were discussing how to fake mental health records to discredit me in court. The goal: frame me as controlling and paranoid. If we plant the seed, the judge will hesitate, Marina had typed. I read the messages 3 times. There it was. The final nail. Conspiracy. And premeditation. I forwarded the screenshots to Cassandra. Her reply was immediate. We'll file an emergency motion to introduce this in court. This destroys her credibility. The timing couldn't have been better. Our court hearing was in 4 days. What Marina didn't know was that her every step was being traced legally, cleanly, and thoroughly. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building the final chapter of this play, and she was still acting like she was the director. Meanwhile, Caden had begun to unravel. Investors were ghosting him. His gym faced breach of contract claims. And now that Marina's name was toxic, his influencer brand began hemorrhaging followers. He posted a video of himself at an airport, talking vaguely about starting fresh. Inez tracked his destination, Costa Rica. He'd tried to skip the fallout. Typical. But he forgot something. He was still financially tied to Marina and 3 open cases. And Marina? She doubled down. The next morning, her attorney contacted Cassandra with a proposal. Marina would drop all asset claims, disappear from my life forever if I agreed to withdraw the fraud charges and keep everything confidential. Cassandra read me the terms. I closed my eyes and asked one question. If I sign this, what message does it send? Cassandra didn't answer. She didn't have to. I already knew. Marina wanted an exit. But she didn't want consequences. Not yet. And I wasn't ready to give her peace. Not until she understood what betrayal really costs. The day of the court hearing arrived wrapped in thick gray clouds. The kind of morning Seattle wears like a warning. I wore a dark suit and a silence I'd spent months building. Marina entered with her attorney and none of the glamour she once wore like armor. Her face was drawn, lips tight, eyes scanning the room like she still couldn't believe this was happening. She saw me and blinked, half shock, half challenge. I didn't blink back. The judge called us in. It was time. We presented everything. Cassandra led with facts. Clean, undeniable, time-stamped truth. Forged documents, stolen data, identity theft, financial fraud. The group chat screenshots sealed it. Marina's attorney shifted uncomfortably. At one point, Marina tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand and said, "You'll have your chance, Miss Lorne. But I recommend you think carefully before you make a false statement under oath." That was when her voice cracked, not from tears but from the realization that this time there was no narrative to control. Caden, of course, didn't show. His name was all over the documents. The judge paused and asked, "Mr. Harmon is currently out of the country, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Cassandra said. "We've submitted a request for international cooperation with Costa Rican authorities, as he is now a material witness in a federal fraud investigation." Marina's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. She thought this was still just between us. She hadn't realized the walls were closing in on both of them. When it was Marina's turn to speak, she took a long breath. "Your Honor," she began, "this was never about money. I was trying to reclaim my life." The judge raised an eyebrow. "By falsifying payroll records, forging your husband's signature, co-opting his data to solicit investors." Marina's voice wavered. "I made mistakes, but Grayson was emotionally distant, cold. He pushed me away. I didn't flinch. The judge didn't either. This isn't therapy, Ms. Lauren. It's a courtroom. And in here, feelings don't erase facts." By mid-afternoon, the ruling came down like thunder. The judge ordered a full forensic audit of Marina's finances. Immediate freeze on all assets she controlled. Divorce finalized. No alimony. She was assigned sole responsibility for all debts tied to her fraudulent ventures, and pending criminal investigation remained open. The gavel hit, and with it 15 years of being taken for granted were buried under one-word consequences. Outside the courthouse, she caught up with me. Her voice was hoarse. "I lost everything." I looked at her, truly looked, and felt nothing. Not rage, not pity, just clarity. "No," I said. "You gambled everything, and you lost. That's different." She reached for my arm. "Grayson, please." I stepped back. "You were right about one thing," I said. "I was too good for this world, but I'm not anymore." Then I turned and walked away. But it wasn't the end just yet. Because Marina had one more secret buried. One more thread I hadn't pulled. Until that evening. When Anita sent me a message. "Check this. It's the final piece." That night I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. Laptop open, rain tapping at the windows like a metronome of memory. I opened the file and Edis had sent. Inside was a hidden ledger, an encrypted spreadsheet buried deep in one of Marina's offshore cloud accounts. She must have thought it untraceable. But nothing in the digital world is ever truly gone. The file contained wire transfers. Not to Caden, not to business expenses, but to name I didn't recognize, Juliet Miles. A quick search unearthed the truth. Juliet was a real estate broker in Santa Fe. Marina had been buying property in secret under a fake business name. And it wasn't just one, it was 4. She'd used funds from our joint equity, forged digital approvals from me, and signed the deeds through a third party she bribed. She was preparing not just to leave but to vanish. The Costa Rica plan was a cover. The real escape plan was in New Mexico. I called Inez immediately. "Can we tie this to her personally?" Her voice was firm. "We already have." "The third party?" "She used her maiden name, a rookie mistake. We've got enough to tie the entire paper trail back to her." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. Marina had been preparing a second life while erasing mine. She had counted on one thing, that I wouldn't fight back. But I had, and now the final trap was snapping shut. The next morning, Cassandra filed an emergency motion to freeze the Santa Fe properties. The judge approved it instantly, and local authorities placed liens on each home. Marina hadn't even stepped foot in them yet. She never would. Later that day, she tried calling again. Blocked. She emailed, ignored. I wasn't responding anymore. I was watching her world shrink, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because for people like her, silence is more powerful than revenge. It means you no longer exist in their game. 2 days later, the media picked up the story. Wellness entrepreneur faces fraud probe. The article didn't name me, but it named her, and Caden, and the retreat. Screenshots of the fake investor data leaked. Her studio's Yelp page was flooded with negative reviews. Clients canceled, sponsors dropped out. Marina deleted her entire online presence overnight. It was over, and she knew it. That evening, I drove out to a quiet spot near the bay. The same place Marina and I used to sit during our early years together, when everything felt full of promise. I looked out at the water and felt no ache, just clarity. Peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it's sharp. Sometimes it's earned through fire. And I had walked through it without burning. Because I had trusted the one thing she never respected. The power of quiet preparation. As I started my car to drive home, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Cassandra. DA's office has accepted the final evidence. Formal charges will be filed tomorrow. That was it. Not a punctuation mark. A clean, permanent line drawn in the sand. The life she tried to erase me from was now the one she could never outrun. A month had passed since the last court date. Marina was now under formal investigation. Her assets frozen. Her reputation scorched beyond recognition. Caden had disappeared from public view entirely. A ghost of Instagram past chased by creditors and subpoenas alike. The properties in Santa Fe were seized. Her studio shuttered. And me. I was finally breathing again. Not with triumph, but with stillness. The kind that only comes after a storm has passed and left nothing but truth behind. I moved into a small house in the Queen Anne neighborhood. A fixer-upper. Hardwood floors that creaked like honest memories. A garden overtaken by weeds begging to be restored. Every evening I'd dig into the soil or patch a cabinet. Not to forget but to remember who I was before I let someone rewrite my worth in silence. This house didn't scream wealth or success. It whispered peace. And that was more valuable than anything she ever chased. One Sunday morning, Jason, my brother, came over with coffee and 2 fishing rods. "Haven't seen you this calm in years," he said as we loaded the truck. "You sure you're okay?" He smiled genuinely. "I'm more than okay. I finally understand what my silence was preparing me for." He nodded. "You could have buried her legally, but you didn't." I shook my head. She buried herself. I just stopped holding the shovel for her. We drove up to a lake where our father used to take us as kids. No cell reception, no noise, just wind and water. While we fished, Jason asked me something I hadn't been asked in a while. "What do you want next?" I thought for a long moment. Not revenge, not restitution, just simplicity. "I want to build something that doesn't need to be defended." He grinned. "That sounds like the Grayson before all this." I cast my line into the water. "No, it sounds like the one I finally became because of it." Back in town, Inez texted one final update. "Charges processed. Marina agreed to a plea deal. No jail time, but she'll be repaying everything she stole. No contact clause included. It's over." I read it twice and then deleted it. Not out of pettiness, out of closure, because her story was no longer part of mine. She had taken everything she could touch, but she couldn't take what I rebuilt from it. That night, I sat on the porch as dusk settled in. The streetlights hummed. A breeze carried the scent of jasmine and cut grass. My past didn't haunt me. It humbled me, because in losing everything she thought I valued, I rediscovered the only thing I ever needed, the strength to walk away with my soul intact. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.